Alrighty, and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the weekly Los Angeles Tribune television program. We're super pumped up and excited today alongside Dr. Natalie Forrest. As always, my name is Mo Rock, and today we have an incredible, as we do every week, Monday at 7 o'clock PSD, we bring together an incredible, eclectic, diverse group of expert panelists to talk about one subject matter that could help improve your life, improve your business, and give you that transformation that right now in this challenging year, we all really need. And today, Natalie, we're talking about a subject matter that I think is very important, and that is value. First of all, we want to actually define what does that even mean to be a person of value, which I'm so excited to discuss today at a round table. And secondly, once we have that distinction, how do we increase it, right? How do we increase our value? So how excited are you, Dr. Forrest, about today's subject matter?
Well, I think value is one of those things that, like you said, is subjective on the one hand side, and yet there are some overriding categories of value, how to provide value to someone else, how to add value to one's own life, and what do we really consider value? I'm extremely excited also because of the panel that we have. And I mean, I have to give this also, we're not keeping any secrets. So there are a lot of technical things happening today. So I'm really excited that I'm even here right now. And I can't wait to talk with all of the amazing people we have joining us today.
Absolutely. And, I think in the year 2020, with so many people having to go digital, it's really become the norm. And people now, transitioning from the physical to the digital was something that I anticipated we as a society would be doing at some point eventually. Many futurists like Yuval Harari have said that was actually going to be the direction that we would go. And consequently, it just so happened that it happened a little sooner than anticipated. So, you said something fantastic, Natalie, and we really have an incredible lineup today. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to go ahead and bring them to the official roundtable. Look at this incredible group of folks. A couple of them may be familiar, but I am just so excited to see everyone here. It looks like Brenda, Anil, Michelle, who was recently named Southern California's Financial Advisor of the Year. Congratulations, Michelle. And Denise, Kenneth. We have so many incredible people here. It looks like Denise's video maybe speaking of some technical things, we'll revisit that in a moment. But I want to get the panel in on this. And as you guys talk about, first of all, what does value mean to you? Also give a little bit of a brief introduction with your answer. And we'll go ahead and start the free form with Brenda, who I know, Brenda, in addition to being an incredible mother and columnist and journalist, you have your own business. You have also trained and taught and transformed the lives of many people with your live trainings. And I know this question comes up quite a bit for you, Brenda, as far as value, because most of the people that paid to come and attend your trainings or be certified by your program, they want to become people of more value. But let's first all discuss this distinction of what does that even mean, to put it in a proper context, along with a brief introduction. So Brenda, we'll start it off with you, and then the floor will be open for whoever else wants to chime in. Go ahead, Brenda.
Well, thank you so much, Moan. It's so good to be back with you and Natalie again. We have a lot of fun when we're together. I'm Brenda Jones. Like he said, I am here, one of the journalists here with the Los Angeles Tribune, as well as I do own the company Belief Company. And, we do talk a lot about value. And I think, it comes down to, what does that mean? And so many people look for what that means as some kind of global thing. And I think there's also that, what does it mean to you? And there's a slide that we always teach on day one. It's your responsibility for change, and it falls on the client, as does the responsibility for value, because it's up to each individual to get value out of something and to bring value to the table. And so I think it's looking at the individual descriptions and definitions, as well as kind of the collective, because something can be extremely valuable to everybody else on this panel. And if I don't use it, if it doesn't apply to me, I'm not going to call it valuable. Not that it's not valuable, it's just not valuable to me. And I think that's that missing piece that so many people, it's valuable, it's not, and they argue on that. instead of looking at it, is it valuable to me? Is it valuable to others? Is it valuable to society?
Awesome. Yeah. And that's a subjective part, right? What matters to us? I mean, we're living in that time frame right now where different things matter to everybody. Michelle, you want to chime in real quick?
Yeah.
I'm going to start with the ladies. So gentlemen, just be aware. I'm going to start with the ladies unless somebody jumps in. Okay.
Well, thank you so much for having me today, Dr. Natalie and Mo. I'm excited to be here. And number one, as Mo said, I am a financial advisor. I'm one of the partners here at the Financial Architects. And what value means to me is, kind of to piggyback what Brenda was saying, is it doesn't mean, like, you have to take the time to listen to find out what is important to that other person. Because what I see valuable, I'm just going to use my business for example. What I see valuable in something that I need to put forth in a financial plan may not make sense to implement that exact same thing for Brenda. So I need to find out what's valuable to her. What are her and what are her values? Am I bringing some value to her self-being, her personality, to what she wants to achieve in life, and making that a little bit better? Because if we're not actually adding to the equation, then what's the point? We're all busy people. Why are we doing that then?
So true, so true. And finances are a lot of value for people. I think I've heard, don't quote me on it, I think it's valuable to some. Denise, hi. We see that your video worked. I've been having issues with mine all afternoon, so I'm glad yours is working. What do you think about value? What does it mean to be of value, or what does value mean to you?
Oh, that's a really big question. But first of all, Mo and Natalie, thank you very much for inviting me to be on here today. Value is a word that if I had a nickel for every time we say it tonight, I would be very wealthy. I have a feeling. So I want to use some different words. And I want to throw out the word respect. And I want to throw out the word honor. And my company is called You Define Wellness. That's it. We leave it up to each person to determine for themselves, and we don't pass judgment on others for what they have as their values for taking care of themselves, their lifestyle, the choices they make in life. So for me, it really all boils down to those two key words of respect and honor.
Wow. Okay, gentlemen, free for all.
All simultaneously?
Yeah, well, you can try.
Okay. So in my field where I come from, I hear the value in the form of value proposition every single day. Startup companies have to determine the value proposition of what they have to offer to their customers. Now in life, I actually believe we have a value. And it is in the eye of the beholder to see the value in there. If I would have to, as a person, constantly morph to somebody who I am not, then I think my value for myself starts actually diminishing. So as they say, if you don't love yourself, how can you love anybody else?
Yes.
So if I don't see value in what I'm saying, but I'm trying to just appease somebody else, then I really don't have any value anymore because I compromised myself.
Well, and then that goes into anybody who is in business, right? Do we charge what we're worth, right? And I'm not going to go there right now because Denise is going, and he'll go, yeah. Well, let me, I think Kenneth may bring a different kind of, the Honorable Kenneth, because he's got that honorary PhD as well. And I know he's a little bit in the dark, but I know he provides a lot of value as well. So how would you define value?
We don't hear you.
For me, it always starts with self first. And in order for me, can you hear me?
Yeah, we're good now.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Well, value always starts with self for me. It's always about how I can bring something to someone else, but I have to make sure that I have to know how to love myself, value myself. Like Axel was saying, I think it begins at home. Like anything starts someone has to teach you that, and that value comes from a source, like a mother or father that tells you how important you are. And like with my children, I always tell them how important they are. In order for me to do it in the world, I have to have a foundation from somewhere. So that starts with me. Yeah, I have a company called Dominant Force where I like to align with everyone that's doing what they do, how they do it, what they love, that value that they have. So for me, I like being part of and supporting others in their value. So what happens is I learn from them. I actually inspire. I get inspired by them. So value for me starts with me first, so I can learn to do it for others.
Fascinating. Yeah, I'm already thinking about, the next things that just pop into my head, but I want to give Anil a chance to briefly introduce himself as well. And it's free for all after that.
Hey, hello everyone. Thank you for having me here. Okay, thanks Mo, thanks Natalie, and great to see Brenda here. I learn a lot from your discussions. Okay, for me, when I'm growing up, what I was taught was respect elders, listen to others. That's the main thing. Value for me is providing value to others will automatically come back to you, whichever form, maybe from business or friendship or whatever. So the value for me is providing whatever I have in a money wise or whichever way they're in need, even a mentorship. Just don't give advice. Actually take it to put their fit together. Okay, what is the help they need? Put an action in place, not just give advice and leave. So that's why I look at in that way.
That's awesome. And since nobody seems to be jumping in on this, I'm going to jump. Okay, just be ready. I'm going to jump. And I usually try to come out of left field to get the conversation going someplace. So, as a former historian, still a historian by trade, we often talk about the value of a country or the values that citizens of a country hold. So if we're thinking about values, I'm originally from Germany. So, completely different values, supposedly, Axel is laughing, but, so values is such subjective issue. So when we live our lives, how do we provide value then? If everybody thinks differently and everybody says it's about respect, what do we do on a daily basis?
We live our life.
Yeah.
We live our life on a daily basis because, I have studied A Course in Miracles, which starts out that nothing has a meaning whatsoever, and any meaning that anything has is lesson number 2 is a meaning that you apply to it. And so therefore, how can you make an a priori decision of what the meaning of anything you do is? You are just presenting, and it's for the others to potentially perceive that there is value in what you're doing or not. And here's a very interesting thing. Quantum physics teaches us the moment you become an observer of your target, you are part of the system, and therefore you're distorting the measurement. Right. So if we understand this correctly, then we just live and others extract value from you or not, but it is not what it is or your value in reality. I think you're rolling your eyes.
Well, Axel, you mentioned something fascinating, and that was that there's no meaning besides the meaning that we give to something. And of course, Nietzsche, really, that's a very Nietzsche-like philosophy, where we as human beings are simply meaning-making machines, and we go around making meaning. And it's a very fascinating inquiry. And again, this is a forum here where everyone can stay in that inquiry. But Axel, one thing that I don't think can be denied is that we are social creatures. And one thing that also cannot be denied is that when I talk about value, Axel, how I see it is the level of value that you give to the remaining components of our civilization. So when I wake up, what drives me is what can I do to change the destiny of humanity, right? And therefore, I'm changing the destiny inevitably of my own life as well. But that is really the fundamental question that I ask. So how I see value is very directly connected to how I can expand, increase the amount of fulfillment in the people that I interact with, people that I work with, people that exist on this planet that I may never meet. But of course, every action has that butterfly effect, right? And how can I decrease the amount of suffering that is going on this planet? So how I see value for me, right, going back to that Nietzsche-like philosophy, Axel, where you create the meaning, is by doing those two things. And I see Denise had her eyebrows wiggled. So that's kind of my call. When I see the eyebrows wiggle, I call on them to see what they say. So Denise, where do you stand right now in this conversation?
I am so agreeing with you. You know, values, we're going a couple of different directions here. It's the personal values we have, and then it's the value that we're bringing out into the world. And Mo, you nailed it with what you said as to what my philosophies are. When I get up in the morning, it's what can I do to be of value to other people? I can put it out there of the best that I possibly can and be at my highest self as much as I possibly can. It's up to the individual to determine if it's of value to them, but it's my responsibility to live at that highest self level every single day.
I want to get Brenda in on this as well. Sorry, Axel, I didn't mean to cut you off.
I just wanted to add a word for her, genuine.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it's, you know, for me, it's kind of a combination of everything, because there is that, you know, the global value, and then there's the personal values, which I think are related, but not necessarily the same. So it's really looking at, I think, so much of the conflict, because at some point, I think, Dr. Natalie, you had brought up the values of the country. And I think that's one of the things, like, you know, when we coach businesses, when we coach relationships, we go in and most people don't know their internal values for themselves, let alone the values of the organization. And I don't think we have a set values of the country. And so it gets to that point of, you know, what are we working for? So even with my girls' dance studio, when they opened the studio, I said, number one, what are the studio's values? What's important to the studio, not at the surface level, but at the deeper levels? Because when we know what the values are for an organization, when we know what they are for the state, for the country, for ourselves, then we can say, here's where we align, here's where we don't. And then it comes back to what Axel said at the beginning, the respect. And I think Denise had also said this, the respect for others. Because I may have a completely different top 10 value system as somebody else. In fact, they may be completely opposite, but that doesn't make one good and one bad. They're just different. And when we can respect that, you know, that's what we're doing when I work individually with someone, looking at those values conflicts that they have just within themselves, let alone within the more global. And then you start taking it quantum, like Axel was doing, and I'll play down quantum rabbit hole all day.
Absolutely. And you know, Brenda, you said something interesting. You said the respect. And the word that occurred for me was the word empathy. Because ultimately, the way I see it is to truly be a person of value, it's a prerequisite to have empathy, right? And what we see, whether it's in life or in business, we have individuals that don't operate with empathy, and they may manipulate and they may get themselves to a certain level for a temporary time period, but inevitably they fall. So to truly have a fulfilling career that is successful, what I have noticed is that authentic empathy must be a prerequisite, because if it is true that we are social creatures, which we've established, and if it's true that the value is predicated upon how we affect other human beings, how could that be possible without empathy, right? Without the genuine empathy of understanding other people. I want to get Michelle in on this because I think it's a subject matter she would have an understanding of. I know, Michelle, you're speaking on the Sue stage this week. Congratulations. And for those wondering, no, that doesn't mean there's a lawsuit. That means that Sue is an organization for women's empowerment. So congratulations. And you were recently also named the Southern California Financial Advisor of the Year because of your empathy, because of the empathy that you show for your clients. I want you to speak as a businesswoman and just as a human being that's a leader. Where do you see your mentality is right now with this conversation?
You know, a couple things came to mind when really when you and Brenda were talking, Mo, and one of it is it has to start with us. And, you know, how I bring value is how can I make myself just a little bit better than I was the day before? And part of that is obviously self-education, it's self-reflection, and it's also a little bit of compromise. When it comes to when you said empathy, the other word for me was compromise, because we each have our own set of values, like you said, Brenda. But when we're willing to compromise, and I'm not saying compromise our values, but come to a middle road and say, okay, let's live together in peace and harmony. Where then all of a sudden now everybody, I don't want to say, you know, everybody's, you know, hand in hand singing Kumbaya, but there's, you know, there's not that tension, there's not that almost that thickness in the air that you're afraid that like literally violence is going to break out, and there's not all that backstabbing and name calling. So it really, when we start adding value, we have to start with ourselves first. What can we do to be a more empathetic person? Where can we do to learn what the other side, what their position is coming from? Not that we necessarily agree with it, but you know, do they have some points to that? And then as a business person, you know, you could find a financial advisor almost on every street corner. So what do I do to set myself apart? And one of the things that I do, I got into the business because my mom was left behind by the financial services industry. My dad passed away with no life insurance. She retired with $10,000 in her 401k. So one of the things that I do to add value is if I'm sitting across a kitchen table or my office from somebody, I'm going to say, would I make this recommendation to my mom? Because I don't think a lot of other advisors would be willing to do that. To say, okay, I'm willing to give up a little bit of fees, a little bit of commission to make sure I'm always going to do what's right for the client. And so part of adding value is maybe taking a little bit of something, not compromising yourself, but taking a little bit away from yourself to make sure the other person remains whole.
And what's fascinating about that, Michelle, is the more empathy that you practice in business, the more you found yourself to be successful, correct?
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
I think that's an important distinction. You know, a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs have this Gordon Gekko mentality of greed is good, or they might watch Wolf of Wall Street, and they, and you know, I've been involved in a lot of cutthroat industries myself, whether it's politics, which I have been a consultant in. I don't talk very much about that, but nonetheless, I have done consulting work in the political field, the entertainment industry, media, journalism. These are very cutthroat, music business. These are cutthroat industries. And yet, what I found was that regardless of the environment, if you stay grounded with who you are, at the end of the day, things do fall into place and things do work out the proper way without you having to lose your soul, so to speak. And Anil, I know you have had a long, successful career. I know you worked in corporate America for many years. And where do you stand on the subject matter, Anil? Go ahead.
I mean, like I was saying, you know, on the value from mentorship, right? I see a lot of mentors, they give wrong advices to people. And because they don't take it to the next level. That kind of little bothers me, right? Because they will just throw in something. Is it mean it? Can you help that person who you're mentoring really making it fit? You know? I mean, I see Mo actually rolling his eyes, so I don't know.
Well, I think people need to understand we have about 17 things going on as the admins of this, but nonetheless, Anil, I would never roll my eyes at you. Maybe I was rolling my eyes at a comment here, but I digress from that. And absolutely, you know, and Brenda, where do you see that role? Because Brenda, you are perhaps very unique in this panel because you have done so many deep dives into people's subconscious minds, and really, yeah, you. And really, another way of saying that is you have literally stepped into, I mean, the shamans and the great mystics of our time consider that to be a very sacred practice, right? Now, here in the modern day world with things like neurolinguistic programming, it's not really seen as sacred, even though I believe it is, because in many respects, you are stepping into the essence of another human being with a lot of the work that you do. And so what that does, though, I know it leaves you, and I've done some of that work. Natalie's done a lot of that work. So we have that understanding, but it almost gives you the spirit of other human beings. And I know you've done that with so many people. So where do you feel this idea of value and empathy, and what is the connection there? And how does that help a person lead their life and lead their business?
You know, it's funny because I met Glenn Morshower through this journey. He was on the panel, last week or the week before?
Yeah.
And he kind of summed it up. It all comes back down to love, that we are all connected. The problem is we get so into the details, and it's in the details where we can differ. And that's where we find the conflict over what person A thinks is important and person B thinks something opposite's important, when actually both people really want the same thing. They're just going at it in different ways. And so that's kind of that thing that we do with the subconscious, is really pull out what is going on at the deeper levels, because we have all these drivers that we don't know about. And so many people go through life going, well, I don't know why I did that, or I don't understand why this, and it really comes down to coming back and having that empathy for yourself first, understanding yourself, and then coming back to, you know, like Axel was saying, that projection. You know, in NLP, we have all these beliefs that we choose to believe are true, like perception is projection, although quantum physics says that that is. And in that, all we see in everybody else is ourselves. And so if we could really sit down and notice that if that person's bothering us, if any of those things are going on, that's really that reflection back for us on where can we work. So in, like everybody was saying, how can I be better today? How can I go out and give one thing more today than I did yesterday? And I think if everybody approached every day in that way, because I don't necessarily go into people's subconscious minds as much as I help them interpret what's going on, because it's a language they don't understand yet until we go through it. And if we can just continue to, if you think globally, if everybody went 1% better than they were yesterday, if everybody went 1% into that higher conscious, elevated themselves that little bit, where would we go globally? Yet we're staying down in these negative emotions, which are, for me, not bad emotions. People think negative is bad. It's not, but just less than where we could be at, and a lower vibration. And that's where we find those issues. And that's where we see the values conflicts, because that's what people are fighting about. They have values that some of them know, some of them don't even know. They just know it's something doesn't feel in alignment somewhere.
Right.
And then they're lashing out.
I love that. I love that. And I know Mo and we all love to be philosophical. So let me throw like just something else in here, because I mean, the subconscious mind is like the most important, crucial aspect. That's the root of everything, where we don't even know where something comes from, right? So let me bring the historian out just for a second, especially because we're talking specifically about the United States. And then you said, Brenda, something about, you know, we're still in that negative energy. You know, when we're looking at the United States, for example, and I'm going to try and tie a bunch of things together to hopefully get you all jumping all around this place. Okay. So when we're looking at the history of the United States, it's built on individualism. We know that. That's a fact. So this country was built on individualism. Me first. Okay, me and my family first. But all of us are talking as if, and that's because we are, the people who are here, we believe in collaboration. And then you go into the marketing and the business, because all of us are in business, and we want to talk about empathy, and we want to talk about, I really want to help you. But there's that other thing where a coach, I forget who said that, I think it was Ania, where a coach tells you, you need to sell this way. And then we forget about, oh yeah, I want to be, you know, sympathetic. I want to help you because I also need to pay my bills. So on the one hand, we have the philosophical and spiritual approach of value, and then there's life. You know, well, there's running a business.
Yeah, if I may, and I don't like to do this, it doesn't do my heart glad, but I have to push you back a little bit on something that you said. Because quite frankly, you know, you said individualism is me first, my family first, and I would disagree with you. I would say that, especially if we take a look at the work of Ayn Rand, whether you're a fan of hers or not, for anyone that really does a deep study of that idea of individualism, I mean, anyone that's read The Fountainhead, for example, would know that the value of being an individual is predicated on the value that you provide to society, not predicated upon the value that is being leached or taken from society. But, you know, if you look at Atlas Shrugged, or if you look at the actual philosophical messages of that type of individualism, those that get rewarded are the industrialists. Those that get rewarded in society are those that create for other human beings, whether it's building big buildings, building railroads, building tech companies, whatever the case may be. And so this idea of attacking, and I'm not accusing you, Natalie, of doing it, but society in general has taken the idea of individualism and in many ways demonized it, made it taboo. And I don't agree with this whatsoever. I think that individualism is the spirit expressing itself. And in other countries, communist countries, that spirit cannot express itself. What is I can't imagine anything more inhumane than telling another human being what they have to do, where they have to go, and who they have to be. There's nothing more inhumane than that. And so this American experiment, which is the greatest experiment, if you ask me, has it been perfect? Absolutely not. Has it been ugly? Absolutely. Has it been nasty? Absolutely. But every scientific experiment gets ugly and nasty. That's how science works, right? And so consequently, I think that individualism is very much needed right now. But first of all, what kind of individualism are we talking about? Because words are very peculiar, okay? Though the individualism I'm talking about is not a FU kind of individualism.
Correct.
It's a kind of individualism that is a honest self-reflection of what can you do to bring value to society. I'd love to hear more from Brenda on this. And then folks, please chime in.
Yeah.
You know, and I probably cross both of you where I can see both sides. And that might be the nature of the beast of what I teach.
That's why you're in the middle, Brenda.
We all agree on this because we're talking about individualism and how do we define it, right? How do we define value? Yes.
And I think I think it's all of the above. That I think it's now everybody needs to understand who they are as the individual in order to help the collective. Yes. Because we really are a sum greater than just the sum of our parts. If we could actually figure out how to be in alignment with one another. And, you know, and Mo's come through training. So he knows about things like parts integration, where you have those parts of you that are fighting against each other, trying to get to the same place. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing just played out on a bigger stage, is all of us trying to get to the same place, but not really having a definition of where it is that is, or how the heck to get there. And so it's like every man for himself, and it's chaos. And if we actually just stopped for a moment and realized we're all going the same direction, we all want the same thing. And if we would stop for a second and stop looking at individualism as being bad, and rather individual as every one of you has aspects and characteristics and resources that can help the collective, then I think this would go so much smoother. And I think we're just at that point where, you know, you talk spiral dynamics, and we're hitting a change in the spiral levels of values. In that regards, you have the pendulum talking about societal swings values wise, and we kind of have this perfect storm of everything coming together at the same time. So I'm not enjoying, but yes, enjoying looking at all of that. It's kind of like watching a really cool tidal shift where everything's coming in and swirling around. And so I'm like, oh, we're moving from this values level to that value level. Ooh, we're hitting the peak of that pendulum. We've got that front edge coming in and crossing with the tail edge and all of these things. And I think people understood it.
Right. But I think that's part of the fun of this whole situation that we're in, right? I mean, we've got like 7 people here, all from different backgrounds, all with different experiences, and we're working so hard on understanding each other, even though there are also some fundamental disagreements, right? I mean, Axel and I, we disagree on why we left our home countries and which country is better or where we prefer to live, okay? And that is and in the same instance, we're still talking to one another, and you know, we have similar ideas. So I think the issue that we're facing is not necessarily individualism, this or that, but how is it playing out in real life? Because we're talking here about, oh yeah, let's understand each other. Well, the people in my neighborhood don't understand each other. I mean, one person has a sign for A, one person has a sign for B, and yesterday they respected each other. Today they don't talk to each other. So the ideal is great, and then individualism.
Natalie, let's go there. Since you talked about signs, let's go there. You know, we want to boost up the ratings, so we're going to go with the ratings. But no, I think even in the political atmosphere, Natalie, this idea of the definition of individualism can be seen regardless of candidates. You know, the traditions may flip from party to party, from generation to generation, but there's always seems to be a little bit of a divide between this idea of individualism and this idea of the collectivism. And this has been a tug of war politically for a long time in America's history. And what can be seen, though, and you as a historian, as a PhD, know this, is that whenever there is a situation where the collectivism becomes the norm, usually the house tends to fall pretty quick, right? Shortly thereafter, you know, communism, the collectivism, extreme socialism, what that usually leads to is a situation in which very few people have consolidated the power, because it's impossible for the idea of socialism to truly exist in the real way, because someone has to, you know, have power. Someone has to have more resource than the other individual. And so, but at the same time, radical capitalism, which gives no safety nets to people and basically says, hey guys, this is a wild, wild west, this is a jungle, that also doesn't work either. Right. And so we as human beings have seen examples of both of this. You know, the jungle is not the solution. Neither is having every element of your life controlled by the government. So where do we find a path? And I'd like to start this particular segue with a gentleman who has had a long experience in business in different parts of the world, and I believe is very qualified to talk on this particular subject matter. That's Axel Tillman. Axel Tillman, as an international businessman, and he's not a rookie, ladies and gentlemen. This gentleman is a seasoned veteran of business. So I really want to hear, and of life, quite frankly, I really want to hear, Axel Tillman, how do we find that balance between these two sides?
So I have very often said that I'm a proponent of democracy. And we need to understand what's the difference between democracy and anarchy. Both have the word freedom in them, right? Only the freedom in anarchy is the freedom of the strongest. The democracy has the requirements that we give everybody the equal rights for opportunity. And when I take a look at the country I come from, Germany, like Natalie, but you said you have a different opinion why I left. We haven't even discussed this yet, but I had just the other day, I had in a pitch competition from Pitch Global, I had a company from Germany, and he told me that the German government has now originated something like a DARPA fund to help young startup companies. And he thought, Jesus, there is finally some money, let's apply. And the nonsense that he heard from this organization and the reasons why they wouldn't fund him is completely proof for me that I have seen over all these years why I don't want to live in Germany in a socialistic society. Granted, it's a higher level of socialism as East Germany was or Russia was at its time, but it's still socialism with a glass ceiling where you cannot penetrate through, because here's my argument. 1981 was the start of the Wintel revolution. So IBM, Microsoft, and Intel came together and started the PC revolution. Name me, please, one company in all of Europe that has a market cap of Microsoft that was created in 1981 or later. You will not find any. So what does it teach you? We have created Cisco, Microsoft, you name it. We have even created the evil empire of, I should probably not say that.
You might as well go there.
I mean, we're there.
That are dominant forces that are the abuse of their powers today, in my opinion. This is where the freedom of the overall business community and the freedom of us human beings in the United States have been impacted by their hiding on a private censorship that under our constitution should theoretically not be allowed. But there is a loophole because it's private that they can actually go there. And so we have the extreme that our understanding of freedom and wealth need to be moderated in this country, and they have not been moderated well enough in the last 20 years. The last big moderation, who knows it? Judge Green breaking up AT&T. That was the last big moderation this country has seen. And it was for the better. When we broke up the telcos, we got better service. And so I believe that we need to have a democracy in business as well as in politics that is really fully functional without giving the most power to more money.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, to Axel, I agree some stuff where, in Europe, there's no billion-dollar companies or whatever, like Microsoft or Google, but all those guys are here creating those companies. We are the ones, right? We are the ones. You're from Germany, you're creating. Natalie, everybody like me, from India, right? I came here as a teenager. It's like every one of us, we are from different parts of the world. We are here, one immigrated company where no other countries have that kind of a immigrated nation. So we are coming together and creating these companies out here, like we are the second largest democracy after India, right? So that's what I say to that.
Yeah, but that only exists, Anil, in a country that allows individualism to exist. Because the reason that Axel was able to come here and form and carve and create and craft a life was because nobody got in his face about what to do or how to do it. And the more regulations there are, the more bureaucracies get expanded, the more individuals if the government could find a way to tax me while I breathe, I'm sure it would. So if everywhere that I go, there's a tax or a new paperwork fee or something I need to do, that slows my creativity down as an entrepreneur. So that freedom is what has allowed this country to thrive. So the question is that freedom under threat? And I'm going to put Brenda Jones on the spot. I want to hear her take on it.
Can I stop at that? Sorry. Like you said, he said about the DARPA project in Germany, right? Which they started recently. Same thing with India. Axel knows about India quite a bit. He went to India. It's a lot of red tape. The government, it's all connection. If you got connection, you can go in. Otherwise, no. Even though India is the biggest democracy, it's all red tape, the government and hassle, all that. Now, just like Germany, now it's opening up in India. They're copying what's here, and in India and all these, they're putting that together. So it's finally happening. But it takes time because they're slow movement. It's really slow. Go ahead, Brenda.
I'm happy that India is making that progress, and I love the people of India. In fact, there's a major publication out of India that we're going to be collaborating with this week. But I do want to hear from Michelle and Brenda on this, as well as Denise, since they're all women and they all have experience in business. And we do have a special place in our hearts for women entrepreneurs at the Tribune. We have several columns dedicated to that. But Michelle, as someone in business who deals with finances, do you think that it's becoming more and more challenging, particularly in the United States, as a woman in Southern California, to grow your business because of these new conditions?
I personally haven't experienced that, but I do know that there is a huge history of that, especially in the financial services industry. Thankfully, I've been able to align myself with people that doesn't hold my gender against me. But it's crazy. One of the big brokerage firms, just to touch on it, they brag about being the #1 company for female financial advisors, but they're only 26% strong of females. So for every one in 4 are women. So there is a big disparity. And and as a financial advisor, one of the big things that we run into, or I run into, and this is why women's empowerment is so important to me, is because of really the values that women hold. They hold caring for everybody else first. They stay home and they take care of the kids. They will leave work and take a sabbatical to be able to take care of a spouse or their children or a sibling or their parents. And so what happens is they're still only making 83 cents ish on the dollar. They work less time in the industry or in corporate America. And so therefore they don't have the same financial resources to be able to save. And women tend to be more conservative when they're not educated. And so there is a big hurdle that women have to overcome because of the values that they hold to put everybody else first. So one of the things that I'm like champion for women is, it's like you put the oxygen mask on yourself. They need to do that with financial services. Because another thing is it's a way that domestic abusers will hold their women really hostage, is that they hold all the money. So now the women don't have an opportunity to be able to leave and go out on their own. So it is a huge, huge problem for women that are not educated and don't have the opportunity to be able to go out on their own. And I do think that it does have a problem. Like, women do have more of a challenge because they tend to defer to more powerful, loud men, not to not think of a better word, but I mean, I found that I was that way for a really long time, where I would be meek and I would sit in the room and let everybody else talk, and I would miss opportunities to be able to pick up clients and to network. And it wasn't until I started to learn to use my voice that things started to shift for me. And so I think that's one of the things that's really, really important, is to teach women that they have value in themselves and what they say is very important. Because otherwise, it's crazy. Even though women own 51% of the or 53% of the businesses in America, you wouldn't know that by the lack of their voice being heard.
And then I saw Denise, you were nodding the whole time.
Yeah. The first 35 years of my career was in the insurance and financial services industry, and I call myself a reformed insurance agent now. So I understand, and Michelle, everything you said was resonating with me because I was in a male-dominated room, and I was in management positions. I got the advantage of being promoted, getting some fantastic titles, frequently the one in charge, and yet I had to learn NLP. I had to learn body language and dynamics and how to command the room, and those were things that were not taught to you. I'm in a different position now, in that for the last 5 years, I am in a female dominated industry of health and wellness, and most of the hundreds of providers who are in my network that we have look just like me. They're middle-aged white women. And just to be blunt, they are. And it's not that we're just not attracting some of the ethnicities that we want, the diversity. But I find I don't have the challenges. And I find that with the people that I'm talking to, being a female is an asset. Absolutely. Because they just naturally assume that I'm going to have more empathy. I'm going to have more caring for what their issues are. They don't understand. Years ago, the book Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, my husband at the time and I started reading it, and I stopped reading at chapter 3 because I found out I was from Mars. So I always came to business with the masculine traits that were known, but nobody would ever know it, and it's just an asset for where I am now.
I mean, it's a sad right now. The thing is, for women, 2.3% of the startups are only funded for women, right? I don't know, Axel, if you chime in,
Yeah.
There's 20. I think there should be a law in every venture capitalist firm. 25% should be funded to women companies, startups, and 25% of every employer should be hiring women. That's kind of
why 25%?
Well, here's the thing. Let me Anil, let me step in on this because here's the thing. When we start trying to regulate society, where does the line end? What I am big on is educating people. What I am big on is empowering individuals. What I am big on is bringing this to light to people so people know that they need to start making better choices in society. But what I'm not big on is telling people what choice to make. As an investor, if someone tells me that, sorry, you have to put 25% of your money in that company just because that person is a woman, it's actually insulting to that woman, because the market must respond to the quality and value. So I think it's a little condescending, quite frankly, to say, hey, I have to pay a certain percentage to that. I think that what we need to do, Anil, is do things like what the Los Angeles Tribune is doing right now, bringing to surface the problems and actively playing a role in making a difference, right? Giving this platform to these ideas that Michelle so eloquently is bringing to surface, that Denise is so brilliantly speaking about her personal experience, and letting society make the choice. Because, Anil, it's a very dangerous precedent when we start getting our hands in other people's pockets.
No, I completely agree with you. I just said, because, we are the most advanced country, US, and women are treated way advanced than any other countries, they say, right? And even with that, even in 2020, we are seeing all these problems. That is the only reason I was saying, if we do these regulations, maybe that will change the mindset of the people, and that's the only reason I brought it up.
No, we cannot regulate this, but your observation is absolutely correct. So in the Pitch Global over a year, let's say 1,000 companies, we are lucky if I see 5% women startup entrepreneurs. And it is my belief that we need to do something within our realm. So I spend more time coaching a woman than I spent actually on a man, because I think they are getting all the coaching and resources every single time. So when I have a woman startup company, I go drill deeper into her value proposition to make it fly to a degree. And there's an exception. There is a company that is called diversity.io that's here out of LA that wants to address the, in tech sector, the underrepresentation of tech women and the underrepresentation of other minorities, and they have a platform to do this. So I spend time to help them so that they get market penetration, ultimately to have a chance of adjusting the picture. But here's one thing, and I would like to ask this to the women. From my perspective, I think women were misled by the men. They were told to be equal to men to compete in the business world, and a woman cannot be equal to a man and shouldn't be, because in society, the balance out of what a woman can bring to the table, I don't need another man in that position.
So let me go. Axel just said, I believe you just said that women cannot be equal to men in the world of business, right?
No. What I said is they cannot be the same thing as the men. They should be women and succeeding on their path and contributing on their path to this world.
I'd like to hear Michelle's take on this, seeing as she's about to speak on a similar subject matter this week. Michelle, what do you think about what Axel just said?
Yeah, I completely understand what Axel's trying to say is we shouldn't come in and try to be a man, because we're not a man. We are a woman. We have we are brought up differently as females. We perceive things and we hear things differently as females. We're able to communicate differently than men. And so I think that when we bring the qualities that we can really shine upon as being a woman, and it doesn't even really have to come down to being a man or a woman. It's what's intrinsically inside of you. What are you bringing to the table that will make you better than the next human being? And if you're better than the next human being because you've done your work, you've done your education, you show up in your best to your best ability, then the position or the job or whatever should go, the opportunity should go to you. Doesn't matter if you're male or female, if what percentage there is, if you're African American, Indian, or whatever, if you are just the best human being that is competing for that opportunity, then that opportunity should go for you. I think when we're looking at that, we should just really strip down the skin and see what's on the inside and what can this person bring to the table that's going to bring value. Maybe a man may not bring the same qualities as I need, because I need somebody that can communicate a little bit better. I need somebody that can be a little bit more empathetic. But I do know that there are some men that I know are way more empathetic than some of the women I know out there too. So you can't, it's not a column here of men and these are their characteristics and their values and what they bring and what you have here for women. It's just looking at what does that person bring? What is that? Yeah. What do they bring to you? And then make the decision.
Well, you talk about allowing the person to basically be rated by the market, right? Not by any other qualities, but what's the value that you're bringing to the market? My concern, and first of all, thank you to one of our commenters, Goldilocks, a celebrity, a public figure who's tuning in right now. Thank you, Goldie. So the question, though, is, are we living in a society now where that's being punished, where that's being discouraged? We all hear about the participation trophy generation, right? So are we now living in a time where, as individuals that are competitive, as individuals that are creators, as individuals that are entrepreneurs, as individuals that are driven to increase their value, right, and work on providing more value, are we, as those individuals, feeling that sense of pressure that there's almost a discouragement or a disdain to be that way? Where do you think?
It depends on what filter you're coming from. I'm sure there's people that absolutely 100% agree with what you just said, and someone else that has a different set of filters who absolutely says, no, I don't see that. I would have been, up until we moved into our office a couple of months ago, would have said that, I've made a good name for myself in my previous career. I've made a good name for myself in my current career, even though it's very male dominated. And yet when we came in, I was working with my business partner and then an associate who's just another business. And someone approached each one of them separately. They're both men, and asked if they were the boss. And I was like, hi, I'm the one that actually, sure, fine. And I thought we were past that. And it was just literally, they looked at, oh, they're men, I'm a woman. And by default, that must mean that I wasn't the one that was in control. And I was like, I'm the most trained out of the three of us in running and doing what we do. Interesting. But every single guy that walked by made that assumption, all within like a week's period. And so I think it really depends on how you're filtering, what you're seeing, and where you are. Like if you're still staying home versus you're an entrepreneur versus if you've been in certain, finance, things like that, where it has been very, you had, for women to compete, they had to step into their masculine. And I think now we're starting to see that shift where men are actually learning to step into their feminine. And women are relearning how to reaccess their feminine, because we're realizing that when we went, like Axel was saying, we went too far into the masculine, that it's not necessarily about a man or a woman based on biological gender differences, but really just looking, like we were saying, at the human being in and of themselves and their energetic vibration. Because you may have, like Michelle was saying, someone who's, legally a man who is way more in his feminine than some of the women that are out there. And so I think if we take off some of those labels and just kind of go, that was 20 years ago, that was 30 years ago, and really look where we are now, I think we have the dichotomy where we can still see remnants of the past, and yet I can also still see where we're going. And we've made such huge strengths and strides. And yet at the same time, that trophy generation, my daughters are part of that. They're competitive dancers. And if you did a solo, you get a trophy, but it's not that you get a trophy. Your trophy was your personal score. So you can kind of look at your season and see how your scores were. And then there's a top 10. So there's still competitiveness. So I think it just depends on who's doing it and how it's being done and the intention with which it's being done and received, that you'll see all different sides of the argument.
The Wall Street Journal, Natalie, made a piece about a year ago where they actually analyzed women in Europe and women over here, in which they found out that the women in Europe, because they have a different sense of societal stability, now look for the sensitive guy. The metrosexual is more a term that is found in Europe than over here, while the women over here seem to still look for the brawn versus the brain or versus the emotion, right? I was personally shocked to see my daughter, what she picked as her first male companions. I said, you are so far more intelligent than them. Why would you actually? Oh, yeah, but they had the brawn, right? So the football player type of a guy, or he wasn't at the time. But that is how the society has shifted Europe over versus over here. And I wish we would come to a more sensitive environment. I'm going to give you one last tidbit. The science has found out that if you have a gut instinct reaction, you are 75% of the time right. If you think through a problem, you're only 35% of the time right. And I think women have preserved more their gut instinct. It took me a long time to trust it.
Yeah.
Can I throw something else in before Mo and I go back at it? Because
hold on, let me get it ready. Let me get my stuff ready. Go ahead,
okay. Because we're talking about, men and women, and we're talking about the official term is equal opportunity, but more of I think Mo actually, Mo actually used the term, are we letting the market decide? And I, of course, I love that idea. At the same instance, I'm going to throw education in here. Because is education actually equal or not? So if you have a very intelligent young male who has never had the opportunities to go to the same school as another young male, then how can we compare those? And I'm going to take it to another point, because culturally that makes a difference. In some countries, it matters what school you go to and what degree you have. In other countries, it matters how well you do in an interview, and that can be trained as well. So how do we let the market decide? What are the values for that?
Natalie, I think that's a very interesting and controversial point, because I think that the bottom line is, from an empowering perspective, from an empowering perspective, to begin and to establish the fact that life is not fair is actually a very empowering place to start with, right? And even if you're, even if you have everything imaginable from outside looking in, we as human beings tend to find reasons to always be a victim, no matter what. This is part of the flavor of life. This is part of the human experience. You can have 10 people in a room and everyone thinks they're the biggest victim, and everyone wonders why the other 9 think that they're the victim, right? This is part of the human experience and the human condition. So to establish that it's just not fair, I think is a very empowering place to be. And then once you get over that, honestly, it becomes a lot easier. I think for us to get, the problem I see, Natalie, is a lot of times we as human beings get caught up in trying to make life more fair, right? Now, and again, I know that this is controversial, but it's not a empowering place to think. There are people that I know that spend their entire lives, well into their 40s, well into their 50s, and they always have someone to complain about, and there's always someone doing better than them, and there's always someone that's less intelligent than them that somehow is more successful, and it's just an amazing phenomenon. And it's they just never get out of this, and the results of their life are always the same. And so I think that establishing the fact that it's not fair, so to say, actually is very fair, because you know that it's not fair for everyone, right? So therefore, it actually becomes fair once you have that establishment. At least that's how I see it. Michelle, Brenda, would you two like to chime in?
Yeah, I'll chime in. It's funny, you're stealing part of my talk for tomorrow. So part of my point is, there's two ways to look at life. And for the first part of my life, I looked at life was happening to me, which allowed me to be in the victim mode. That's how I grew up. That's what I was taught. That's what I saw emulated around me. And then I changed my associations, and I learned that life was actually happening for me. So I looked at what lessons can I learn from this? What out of this really crappy situation, what can I learn from it and make myself better and learn and change my situation? So it's almost like you have to break a generational cycle about looking at your life as being a victim versus looking at it as how is it helping you? And I think this whole COVID-19 thing is a very good representation of the two different mentalities that we have. And you can see a lot of entrepreneurs are like, okay, I'm gonna what opportunities are out here? How can I make that COVID-19 successful? And it doesn't necessarily where you come from. And then you have the kind of the employee mentality is oh my God, all these things are happening to me. And so it's I kind of lost my train of thought, but it's really looking at it's looking at like, what is your mindset about it, and what are you willing to do to change your mindset? Because it's not going to be something that happens overnight. It's something you have to work on time and time and time again. And that's why like for me, I personally, once I started changing my associations, started reading more, becoming panelist here, and really started to expand myself. It's funny. Life wasn't as unfair as it was, 5-10 years ago, because I've learned to, even when an opportunity isn't there, I've learned to become resourceful and make an opportunity when it doesn't look like there's anything there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's kind of at the pinnacle of everything that I teach is, are you at the effect of everything, or are you able to affect it? And anything that we're not choosing to be able to affect it, we're living in the effect of things, where if we're at the effect of everything else, we don't have the power to change it. And if you look at anything, I tell people nothing bad has ever happened to me. And if you looked at my life, you would look at me like I was crazy when I say that. But like Michelle says, I don't look at any of those things that have happened as bad. I can look at every single thing and say, this was for me, like she was saying. There was a learning here, and that learning is what's putting me on that course correction that I need to get to that amazing life that I'm in this earth dance to do. That, I chose to be here. I chose to experience certain things and to get certain learnings. And so many people sit in that poor me mentality. I look at my oldest brothers. I have 3 half brothers and a half sister. My brothers are only a year apart each. Yet they have drastically different outcomes in life, because some looked at their lifestyle because they grew up very poor. Their parents got divorced, or like all the things that could happen happened. And some of them took it as this happened, therefore I can't. And some of them took it as this happened, therefore I can. And we really get to choose that in any given moment. How many people at COVID went, oh, COVID, shut down, can't do anything. Yet how many businesses started, grew, expanded, and just really hit all new levels because it really comes down to, do you want to look at, oh, these things are happening to me and I have no say in anything, so really why bother? Or all of these things are happening, where's my opportunity? Where's this challenge going to lead me? What do I get to learn here? And we get to choose that every day. And some days are easier than others. There are some days in life where it's like, wow, this is really, really sucky. this is really, really crappy. And I have, in true true authenticity, stood in the middle of the street screaming at the sky for what effing purpose? To try to get that learning so whatever was going on could move on. But until I get that learning, I'm there in it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm really resonant.
Yeah, Denise. Yeah,
I
saw you.
Yeah. Of course, I'm really resonating with what Brenda and Michelle said. But I look at it as not two mentalities. I'm looking at it as four. And what I have, I've named them the can'ts, the shan'ts, the don'ts, and the won'ts in the world. Okay, so you've got the can'ts, and those are the people who can't wait to engage. They can't wait to experience the growth. They can't wait to move on to the next level. They're excited and they're motivated. You have the shan'ts, and those are the people who shall not do something. They have a perceived limitation of some sort, or in my world, a disability that they can't engage in certain things. You have the won'ts. They're not going to. They're going to they're going to be the Archie Bunkers. They're going to cross their arms. They're not going to budge. You can't persuade them to move to the other side. And then you have the don'ts, and this is a huge percent of the population. In my world, it's about 61% of the people out there. These are the people who are somewhere, they're floating around. They're still learning what their values are. They're still learning what their identity is, and they don't know how to move on to the next level. They don't know how to, change my attitude. They're still in a new growth stage. And so I've written down on my paper here a couple of times how, the big word how is, how do we help facilitate this? How do we help people identify what their values are? And there are a lot of people out there like, what do you mean you don't know what your values are? I'm telling you, there's a lot of adults out there who just don't really understand.
Yes.
And how do we help guide them to it? And so that's the pressing point that's on me all the time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I was one of those adults. I didn't
I was
understand
too.
values.
Yeah.
Until I walked into a 3-day weekend course and went, that's a thing?
Yeah. Until the age of 50. That was me.
Fell in love with it. And it's like the pinnacle of, I get to start teaching that again this weekend. I'm like, yay, it's values class. But so many people, they don't know what's important to them. Or for those that coach people on this panel, how many times you say, what do you want? And they go, I don't know. Well, I don't want. Great. What do you want? I don't know. And nobody seems to know. Well, that's why no one can get anywhere, because no one knows what they want. No one knows what's important to them, even if they do know what they want.
Mm-hmm.
But Brenda, please, if you...
I was just going to say, and a lot of times people, those of us that are entrepreneurs, that are public figures, that do things like come on live streams, we inevitably have people reaching out to us. And a lot of times what I hear from people is, Mo, I want to make more money. I want a nice car. I want to start a business. I want to do this. I want to do that. And it's funny because I would ask them, well, what are your values? And 99% of the time, what I get is, well, I don't really know, but I want a Ferrari. And my answer is, well, how the hell can you tell me what you want when you don't even know who you are?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm glad that you brought that up.
That's their self-sabotage.
Yeah.
Right.
Brenda, you said, however, something very interesting. And the depths of what you said is actually very far-reaching. You said we have chosen this life that we are experiencing prior to our incarnation. Now, Neil, I've borrowed a lot from your culture, karma. I define this as life being predestined. So a moment you get actually into the mindset that there is nothing you can change about it, that you live in the moment to learn the lessons, to see the film that is actually rolling in front of you, and be happy that you have the opportunity to experience what you see. Because the acknowledgement that we have chosen our life is the acceptance. And there is, Natalie, a German movie that has perfectly addressed this. Run, Lola, run. You remember this? She tried to change the outcome 20 times to just get to the same fate again. I don't think people ever understood that movie correctly, but I borrow a lot from Anil's culture. in my understanding and coping with the world. That doesn't mean I'm laying back and don't do anything anymore. I'm struggling, I'm doing hard what I can every single day fresh. But I have accepted no longer to judge the outcome.
Well, just because you're detached from the outcome doesn't necessarily mean that the future is already set, Axel. I think, I agree with being stoic in many respects and being detached from the outcome. But I don't believe that the outcome is set. I believe that we all start out with a genetic code, and that's our DNA. And that genetic code has certain predispositions. And perhaps that is pointing us in a certain direction. I believe, the time, the place where we're born, these are all things that you can't change. But I think that we do have the ability to change, to modify, to form, to create. And again, we don't have the time today to go into this rabbit hole because we're entering the final run of the show here. But since you brought up his name, we have to do this kind of like a debate, since you brought up his name. Anil, go ahead. You have 2 minutes. The floor is yours since Axel brought up your name.
I mean, thanks, Axel, for telling about karma. I believe, Indians, we believe in karma. What you do is what you get. So one thing I learned recently from a good friend of mine. He does every year. He says, I'm going to help 50 people. Actually helping, not just mentoring, actual help, doing stuff for them. And he writes it down, what he did, to who or what. And he does this regularly, every year. I thought that was an amazing thing, and trying to follow in that steps. That's one thing. It's a great thing you guys have put on, and I plan to be here every Monday. Very excited. Great. That's about it. Go ahead.
Well, I think what we see here is that there are so many ideas of how we see value, and yet this group somehow has come together in a specific way. And while Brenda was talking, and Axel and Denise and Michelle, the one thing that popped into my head, and Mo as well, gotta throw them in there, was suffering is optional, because it all has to do with our perspective. I can say I made a mistake. Oh my gosh, how am I ever going to get out of this? Or I can say, hey, that didn't go as I planned, so let me try something else. I just learned something. And I think that's what I get from everybody here thus far, that it's really about the perspective. I don't use the term mindset because nothing should be set in my mind. That's just me. I'm like picking on words, but I know what we're talking about. And so the value seems to be the same thing, that we may know our values, but when we try to help somebody else, we need to adjust our values. We need to, I think Michelle used the term compromise, right? We need to say, okay, how can we meet in the middle? And that's, in the end, that's what collaboration is about, right? And I mean, that's what we're doing here right now. That's why from the Tribune, we're bringing in people just to talk and collaborate, because somehow we all end up in alignment sooner or later, because we all want to help. That's why we're here. And if we're talking about pivoting in these times, Michelle mentioned it, Brenda mentioned it. I know Denise also just had, a great month. So it's really, how do we approach things? If you know your value, if you lead yourself with a focus on that value, then you can go and you can make a list. Who do I want to help? How do I want to help? Or maybe every morning and every evening you use gratitude. But it's really fascinating how, while we're talking about value, all these different things pop up. I love it.
Yeah, well, that's the human experience, Natalie. I mean, look, here we brought a group of people, and this is why it's important not to judge a book by its cover. Because a person may see Axel Tillman, a seasoned businessman, an investor. Just a few days ago, he spoke. He was invited by UC Berkeley to speak on business in cutthroat environments, and yet here he is citing the Bhagavad Gita of all things. So you may not see that when you allow society to give you that lens. Going back to what Brenda was talking about, that lens on how you see the world. You see, we have socialized mind, which is not really your mind, which is the mind that society instills in you, and you have your individual mind. And again, we're bringing it back to the beginning of the conversation, why I do believe that healthy individualism is the way to go. Now, again, how do I define healthy individualism for myself is centered around the idea of empathy, because I think that individualism without empathy is what causes the war, the greed, the destruction, the pain, the suffering, broken relationships, broken families. All of that stems from a lack of empathy combined with individualism. So individualism without absence is the reason that this world has wars. It's the reason why neighbors don't get along. It's the reason why there's blood on the streets in different parts of the world. It's the reason why there's been blood on the streets in this country this year, because of this idea. So the solution to all wars on the planet, all pain, all hunger, all suffering, all of the things that create a lack of harmony and disharmony amongst our species stem from that lack of empathy. Because how could I possibly do something to hurt Brenda or to hurt Michelle if I feel what she feels? And yet we all have the ability to do that if we allow ourselves to do it, but we don't as a whole because of fear. And Axel, where do you feel, how can you follow up on that point?
What popped in my mind was a little interesting experiment that I saw the other day, came in one of my news feeds. Somebody took a family of black ants and a family of red ants and put them in a glass jar. And they were running around quite happily. Then from the outside, somebody shook the glass jar, and the two ant generations started fighting against each other because each held the other one responsible for the what was happening to them, what they didn't understand. If I look what happens right now in the United States, we are such a divided country, but we do not know who shook us actually up. We are pitted against each other instead of talking to each other at this point in time. And this is where I agree with Mo. We need to hold our ground and step up. And when you, Michelle, and Brenda and Denise spoke, it's not about women versus men. It's about us individuals contributing to each other. And we need to do this even as a society here in the United States as a whole. We need to have real peaceful dialogue. We don't smash windows. We don't burn up streets. We need to talk and address the problem.
Let's go ahead and give everyone a final word as we go to the final few minutes of this real powerful, one thing that we can tell you all here at the Los Angeles Tribune is when we do these live panels every Monday at 7 o'clock, you don't know where the conversations go, right? Because we allow the experts to really express what's in their soul, express what's in their mind. And so here we started the conversation about value in life and business, and we're ending it. And we talked about reincarnation. We've talked about quantum physics a little bit. We talked about Germany. We talked about the last thing that I thought that we would talk about today is the Bhagavad Gita. That one really hit me out of left field. I was not expecting that. I promise you.
But any two things can be connected. It's fine.
That's very much true. Absolutely. I'm learning that, Brenda. I'm coming to learn that. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to give everyone here a chance to give a final word, and please don't feel rushed. Whatever it is you want to express, and also let people know a little more about where they can find you. If anyone watched this that was inspired and moved by anything that one of you said, they may want to add you on social media, or just a little more about your business. So let's go ahead and do that with everyone here as we wrap this up. I'd like to start with Michelle, who, again, as I mentioned earlier, has had a real busy and productive week. Last week, she was named Southern California's Advisor of the Year. So congratulations again for that, Michelle. And you have an incredible talk coming up this week. So please let people know about all of the exciting things going on in your world, but also a final word related to the topic that we discussed today. Go ahead. The floor is yours, Michelle.
Great, thank you. And thank you again, Mo and Natalie and the Los Angeles Tribune for inviting me on this very dynamic panel today. I was glad to be able to contribute, and I also have learned a lot. And, you know, when we talk about value, you know, to me, it all comes down to my heart and my soul. And what can, in two ways, what can I bring as a human being to society? How can I contribute? How can I make a difference? And then in business as well is how can I make you as a client, how can I make you a little bit better? How can I make you get a little bit closer to your goals and dreams? And it's just, you know, it's adding that little bit. And I think Brenda, you said that if we just, you know, got up and we just try to be 1% better that one day, then you know, and we did that collectively, what would the world do? Well, if we did that once 1% every day for a full year, we would be 365% better 1 year later. And to me, that just blows my mind. Can you imagine being almost 4 times better the human being that you are sitting here today? So that's what I want to challenge everybody that's here today. What can you do? Just take 5-10 minutes. What can you do every single day just to make yourself a little bit better? You know, is it reading 5 words, you know, to of some kind of a business book to make yourself a little bit better? Is it taking another 5-10 minutes just to meditate every day? Is it, you know, donating some time to a homeless shelter? Is it, you know, doing some proper service to, you know, whatever is in your business? You know, what can we do to step outside of our comfort zone and just make a difference to everybody that is watching here today? And so, again, I'm a financial advisor. I do everything from life insurance to retirement planning, college savings. I really believe that everybody has the right to be educated and empowered. I don't charge anybody to have an initial plan done. You can find me on Facebook. My personal page is Michelle Farrell. You could also find me, I have a business page, Michelle Farrell at the Financial Architects, or you can find me on my website, mkminsurance.com. So thank you again for being here. I had a blast, and that's my challenge to everybody today.
Awesome. Who wants to go next?
Who's up?
I'll go next.
Well, let's go with Denise.
Awesome.
Yeah, let's go with Denise. Thank you, Mo and Natalie, for reaching out and asking me to serve on this panel tonight. And to my co-panelists, this has been a delight to get to know you, and hope our paths will be crossing again soon. I wanted, as I'm thinking about this topic of being a person of value and how we can increase our value, you know, the thing that's popping up in my head is I have been so dismayed on the negativity that we're seeing in social media, the hatred, the attacks. I don't remember it ever being like this before, and maybe it was, and I was just ignorant to it 4 years ago, but it's really disheartening to see it. And if we could just stop and check our facts and listen to the other person, and whether we agree with them or we don't agree with them, it goes back to what I said at the very beginning. It's honoring and respecting. I may not like what someone stands for, but you know what? There are a lot of people who don't like what I stand for. But I have to be true to myself. And I hope and pray that this will be over with soon and that we will turn, but I fear that some of this residual feeling will still be there. So My mission is to help people be their highest and best self by introducing them to the people who can help them be their highest and best self. And that's what I'm going to continue doing. If you want to reach out to me, I can be found on social media very easily. My company name is You, as in YOU, Define Wellness, as in we each define wellness on our own terms. And so easy to find me on all the social media platforms on our website, youdefinewellness.com. And I'd love to connect with anyone to continue the conversation and see how we can contribute to the world. And again, thank you for letting me be here tonight.
Thank you so much, Denise, and real beautifully stated. And I think just the only thing I'll add to that, if I may, real quick, is we have the power to change that, right? Whether it's on social media or whether it's interacting in society, we ultimately are the people. So if we want a more tolerant society, the great Michael Jackson said, start with the man in the mirror, and don't underestimate the impact that you can make. Because I think that's one of the biggest unnecessary handicaps that human beings are giving themselves, is they don't acknowledge the power of one person. If we knew how powerful we were, you probably wouldn't even believe it. Speaking of powerful people, we'd like to let Anil Ramaneni have his final few messages and a little more about the different businesses that you're involved with, Anil.
I would like to tell everyone that be passionate, think long term. Be passionate at whatever you do, and think of a long term. Don't be like shortcuts and right now, or everything will be long term. It's great. And like Thomas Edison, he failed 1,000 times, and 1,001 he has passed. Right? The biggest failure you do, the bigger success you get. That's the input from my side. And I run an IT solutions company, and work with small, medium, and large companies, supporting their IT application development and stuff. And I'm an angel investor and part of TISOCAL executive director. And we fund early stage startup companies. So if anybody's looking for funding, please come to TISOCalangels.com, and that's about it. You can find me on LinkedIn, CQ Infotech, or Anil Ramaneni. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Anil, and thank you for playing an instrumental role in a lot of the behind-the-scenes work at the Tribune as well. So Anil definitely has really made a massive impact that has allowed all of us to be here today as well. Axel Tillman, the floor is yours.
So let me start out with one thing, which is the beacon of hope. The stock market, through old rule, says buy low, sell high. And if we perceive that we right now have difficult times, it can only go upwards from here. And this is the greatest opportunity for many in their lifetime, because I have not seen it in my entire life that deep or that bad as it has become right now. So therefore, I am in extreme hope for what the future holds. It can only be bright. On top of this, I like to encourage everybody to live in the now and not project on anything that you have experienced in the past, that this is the outcome of the future. This will keep you wholesome and sane in the process where we are in. This is where you will see your own true value and the value of others with whom you will actually cooperate and work. And please, for all the American listeners in general, do yourself a favor. Look across the fence, not only across the fence inside the United States. Look what other newspapers, what other areas are doing in the current situation to get a fair assessment of what is really happening. It will be very eye-opening. And the best way you can reach me at is basically reach out on LinkedIn at Axel Tillman, the way I'm spelled. You find me on LinkedIn. I do much more LinkedIn interaction than I do Facebook. And I'm looking forward to hear from everybody who wants also business advice. I'm going to market strategist and other. We can also talk about life, or we can all talk about COVID. Anything is possible.
Thank you, Axel Tillman.
Natalie.
And thank you, Axel, for generously sharing your time. We know how valuable your time is and how busy your schedule is, and we know you'll be traveling a lot in the next few months. So thank you, Axel, for being one of our regulars here on the panel, and whenever you have time in your schedule, graciously giving us your time to share your wisdom. And we've had some fantastic conversations in the past about COVID, and we know that it's a touchy subject matter. And we will be discussing that more in the future, because here at the LA Tribune, we are all about freedom of speech. And Brenda knows this because she was able to facilitate a great conversation, an amazing conversation. Really, truly, I think that was a classic, Brenda. I think that was a classic moment and that will be known as one of the classic moments. I think that most of the people that will come across that video have not come across it yet. So I think that's going to be floating around for years and years to come. And that's, of course, a great conversation that you and I had with Del Bigtree, an Emmy Award winner who we also awarded at the summit. But I want you to just, really, Brenda, close this out with what you have to say before we give it to Natalie. And I know it's been real, these conversations, they always blow me away at the end. I don't know about you guys, but it always really, I feel like we have consistently found a way to do the climax at the end here with just some real powerful, stuff coming. But Brenda, go ahead. The floor is yours.
I mean, as always, thank you for having me on the panel. I always love finding where these conversations go, and we do never know where they're going to go. And so thank you for being a part of that, everybody that's on the panel today. And, to kind of play off everything that everyone's been saying, is it really comes down to when you wake up in the morning, so many people think, what can I get today? And I had heard this, I don't know if it was at a mastermind or where it came from, but it's not about what can I get today. If you wake up with what can I give today, that right there switches everything, because it automatically puts you in a place of service. It automatically puts you in a place of having gratitude that you have something that you can give. And no matter how bad things look right now, when you can come back into gratitude, start there. Like when everything else looks miserable, start there. Because somewhere along the line, we have decided that if we believe different, if we think different, that means we can't like one another. And I think the more differently we think, all the more so we should have the conversations to find out why. How do they think the way they think? What filters, what has happened in their life that brings them there? Because that's where that empathy that Mo talked about. Because everyone on this panel, I would say, probably has a major disagreement on some political platform somewhere. And yet we can all sit here and still have agreement. We can still have discourse, and we can still be friends and get along. And I don't know where that got lost along the way. Because one of my best parenting friends, we could not disagree on more things about how to raise a kid. Yet we're the best of friends. And so if we can disagree on that, there's so many places where we can agree to disagree and still be civil and appreciate and respect. And I think if we can remember that we are still just humans all on this one earth dance, and that if we can actually shift back into how do we make this the best dance ever, I think it shifts everything.
So beautiful.
And so for me, I mean, that's everything that I teach. Mo knows, he's been to some of my classes. And,
that's actually how we met, in full disclosure.
I know.
Brenda was my instructor.
You didn't even finish class, and I must have been that good.
I don't think I've ever finished any class I've been in, so that would just be.
What are you not having that you used to have, Mo?
Absolutely, no, but Brenda, I'm so grateful and honored for you as a human being, for so many different ways, including just the graciousness that you go about your life and the authenticity. And speaking of disagreeing with people, I disagree with people here all the time. I disagree with Anil. I disagree with Natalie. I mean, Anil's trying to tell me how to invest money, 25% here, 30% there, but yet I love them dearly. And this is, we need to, as leaders, show this as an example. And so, Natalie, I would love to just close out this week's show with the final word, and then we're going to end this once you're done speaking, I'd like to thank all of the panelists for joining and all the experts. I'd like to thank the viewers. If you're watching this live or if you're watching this after the fact on demand at home, Natalie, go ahead. And just before you do, I want to remind everyone, Mondays, 7 o'clock PST, we do these weekly, and they run at about 60 to 90 minutes. And so, Natalie, the floor is yours for the final closing talk.
Yeah, no pressure at all. You know, the climax comes at the end. So yeah, no pressure. I'll just leave it at that. It's like, what? I really don't have anything to add other than that, as every time when we do this from the Tribune, we never know where it's going to go. We have a great topic and then it just goes, and that's what this is supposed to be. But I could not feel more honored and humbled for everybody who shows up as they are. No pretense, and not trying to sell this or that, but just engaging. Because in this conversation, we had a number of times people say, "Oh yeah, I remember this," or sharing a personal story, and that, I think, that is self-leadership, and that's where I think the common value that I heard was, it all starts here, whatever your values are. So the only thing that I want to let everybody know is, and I heard everybody say that, so this is not me, this is what I heard everybody say, figure out your own personal values first. And once you know your values, then understand that every other person, and this is me now, is also unique, is also needed, also deserves respect. So once you know your values, accept the other values, and just go on with the dance. And when you said the dance, I couldn't help but think of that one song by Garth Brooks, The Dance. Oh, yeah. It makes me cry every time. It's just one of those things where you just go into that mode. And so dance, because you're not here to suffer, you're here to live. You're not here to survive or exist, you're here to live. So take your best shot at it every single day. And every single Monday, or when there's a big event, just come on back by and see what we're doing next.
Thank you so much, Natalie, for that. And on that note, again, thank you all for watching. Make sure you like us on Facebook. Find us on Instagram, Los Angeles Tribune. And until next week, we at the Los Angeles Tribune. We'll see you soon.
Hello and welcome to the Los Angeles Tribune. Since 1886, our name has been a part of the world of journalism. We have earned a reputation for being a publication that practices integrity, authenticity, and responsibility. For general inquiries, contact today. Thank you on behalf of the Los Angeles Tribune team.